I still remember the day Maya and I moved into our college dorm. Even though we had been inseparable since first grade, living together here felt like the beginning of something new. People always said our names like one, Lena and Maya. Our room was small but cozy, two single beds, a shared desk, fairy lights around the window. Her side was always tidy, books stacked in perfect order, a little lavender candle by her bed. Mine was messier, with hoodies hanging around and snack bags half open. But it worked. We balanced each other. We had our own rituals, morning coffee runs, late night gossip, movie marathons on weekends. Whenever life got hard, assignments, homesickness, pressure, we turned to each other. That night felt no different. Rain poured outside, quieting the world. After finishing a cheesy rom-com, we laid in our beds, only the warm fairy lights softly glowing. I glanced at her. Maya's face was turned toward the window, curls spilling over her pillow, a gentle smile on her lips. And suddenly, my heart skipped a beat. Have you ever wondered, what if we were more than best friends? Maya's whisper floated through the dim light, eyes locked with mine. My heart raced. You mean dating? She nodded slightly. Maybe, or maybe just wondering. The silence between us wasn't heavy, it was electric. Her eyes flickered to my lips. I felt a buzz all over, like lightning was nearby. Maya sat up, hesitating. Can I? She asked, barely audible. I nodded. Her lips brushed mine, soft, hesitant, not rushed or dramatic, just real, fragile. When she pulled back, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. Something had shifted, not the end of friendship, but the beginning of something deeper, something we hadn't dared name until now. The next morning, I woke to the sound of soft rain outside. Maya was already awake, lying on her side, watching me. Our eyes met, and she gave me that same gentle smile she wore right before our kiss. My stomach fluttered, not from regret, but from not knowing what came next. Morning, she said softly. I sat up, pulling the blanket around me. Everything suddenly felt smaller, our beds, the room, the space between us. Morning, I replied. She slipped on her hoodie and smiled. Coffee? Maybe that was her way of guiding us back into something safe. I nodded. Yeah, coffee sounds good. We walked the hallway in silence, our slippers tapping the floor. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Something had changed, and we both felt it. Back in our room, we sat facing each other, hands wrapped around mugs of warm coffee. I finally said it. About last night, Maya bit her lip and nodded. I've been thinking about it too. I looked down. I don't want to lose what we have. You're my person, Maya. You always have been. She reached for my hand. Maybe we've always been more. We just didn't know how to call it. Those words cracked something inside me, something that had waited years to breathe. She stood, then gently asked, Can I sit with you? I nodded. She crawled into my bed, her body warm beside mine. No urgency, just quiet closeness. Her head rested against mine, and her fingers traced the inside of my wrist. When she kissed me again, it wasn't hesitant. It was soft, sure, and full of all the things we hadn't dared say out loud. The days after felt like I was holding a glowing secret in my chest. Outwardly, nothing changed. We still went to class together, laughed over memes, shared snacks. But beneath it all, something new was growing. Quiet, delicate, unnamed. I noticed her more, the way her eyes lingered on me when she thought I wasn't looking, how her hand brushed mine a second longer than before, how my name sounded gentler on her lips. One night, we got ready for a party. Maya stood in front of the mirror, her back to me, asking for help with her necklace. As I clasped it, my fingers grazed the back of her neck. She shivered. "You okay?" I asked. "You just feel close," she whispered. I used to think love was a one-time thing, maybe twice if the universe was feeling generous. I had my once, and it broke me. Not just the kind of heartbreak you cry over for a week and move on from, the kind that lingers in silence, in memories that sting like open wounds long after the person is gone. So I made myself a quiet promise: no more love, no more letting someone in far enough to hurt me. I was done. Then came her. We met through mutual friends. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. But her laugh? It lit up the room before I even knew her name. She didn't try to impress. She didn't try to fix me. She was just present, soft and steady, like a quiet song I didn't know I needed. One night, as we walked home from a coffee run, her hand brushed mine. Just a small touch, but it sparked something. "Tell me something real," she said. I told her I didn't do real anymore. She just smiled. "I think you do. You're just scared." Maybe I was, because slowly her presence started to feel like home. Her voice softened the sharp edges of my days. Her attention made me feel seen, not in a flashy way, but in the gentle, steady kind that makes your soul exhale. And then it happened. Not in a grand confession, not with fireworks, but in silence, in the way her hand found mine, in the way her head rested on my shoulder like it belonged there, in the way my heart stopped bracing for impact when she was near. That night she stayed. Nothing happened, except everything changed. I didn't mean to fall in love again, but I did, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like healing. She made me feel safe again. I used to sleep alone, not just physically, but emotionally. Even when someone shared my bed, I never felt truly held, never felt seen. But the night she stayed over, it wasn't about touch. It wasn't about passion. It was about presence. Her breath beside me, the way her hand found mine under the blanket like it belonged there. I didn't know love could be quiet. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't ask me to open up. She just laid beside me, tracing slow circles on my arm, as if saying, "I'm here and I'm not leaving." And for the first time in years, I believed someone. Waking up to her felt surreal. She was already in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring cereal, like it was just another Tuesday, like she'd done it 100 times before. But it wasn't ordinary, not for me. It was a new kind of intimacy, not loud, not dramatic, just simple and soft and steady. She smiled when she saw me, not the kind of smile that asks for anything in return, just one that says, "I'm happy you're here." And in that small kitchen, under the early sunlight, something in me shifted. I stopped waiting for the moment she'd leave, stopped bracing for the pain I was so used to. I didn't know what we were. I didn't have the right words. But I knew one thing. When she held my hand, I didn't want to let go. Maybe that's what healing starts with. Not grand gestures, just someone who stays. I didn't plan to fall, but she made me stay. I used to think love had to be loud to be real, passionate, chaotic, the kind of fire that burns you up and burns you out. So after the last time left me scorched, I swore I'd never love again. And then there was her. We didn't mean to fall. We weren't even trying. It was supposed to be casual. Coffee runs, lazy movie nights, shared silence that felt more honest than words. But something in the way she looked at me made my guard start to slip, like she saw a version of me I forgot was there. The first time she asked, "Do you feel it too?" I couldn't even speak. My chest was full of words I wasn't ready to say, so I just nodded. That night, we curled into each other under one blanket, our hands gently intertwined, like a question waiting to be answered. And in that stillness, with the sound of rain outside and her breath steady against mine, I felt something shift. It wasn't the rush of lust or the thrill of being wanted. It was the quiet safety of being known. She whispered, "You don't have to be afraid anymore." And somehow I wasn't. We didn't define it. We didn't need to. We moved through days like we'd always done this. Soft mornings, shared laughter, brushing shoulders in the kitchen like gravity was pulling us closer. It wasn't perfect. I was still scared, still wondering if love was a risk I could afford. But when she looked at me, really looked, I stopped worrying about labels and timelines, because healing doesn't always come from solitude. Sometimes it comes in the form of someone who sees your broken edges and stays anyway. She didn't ask me to fall. She just gave me a reason not to run. The moment I stopped running, I didn't expect her to become my safe place. I didn't even expect her to stay. But there we were, tangled up in blankets on a Sunday morning, the rain tapping softly on the window, her fingers drawing quiet patterns on my arm. Nothing about it was dramatic. There were no grand declarations, no promises whispered at midnight, just her presence, her calm, her breath, steady and close. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to hide the mess inside me. She never asked for perfection. She didn't want a version of me that was healed and whole. She wanted the real, the wounded, still learning, still figuring it out me. And I had never felt more seen. One morning, I caught her watching me, the kind of look that says, "I know who you are and I still choose you." I froze, unsure of what I could possibly offer in return. But she didn't ask for anything. She just smiled and poured me coffee like we had done this forever. That's when I realized love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up barefoot in your kitchen, hair tied up, asking if you still like cinnamon toast. Sometimes love is soft. Sometimes love whispers instead of shouts. And sometimes love is just a quiet hand reaching for yours in the dark, asking nothing, promising everything. I didn't know I was ready to try again, but she made staying feel safer than leaving. She asked me to stay, and I did. The night she asked, "Can I stay again?" something inside me shifted. We weren't rushing into anything. We never did. Every moment between us was slow, a gentle unfolding, like a secret you whisper only when you feel safe. That night, as the door closed behind us, she kissed me with a kind of quiet hunger, not desperate, not demanding, just real. Her lips pressed softly to mine, her hands asking instead of taking. We moved like the world had faded away, like there was no one else and nothing else but this. It wasn't lust, it was comfort, closeness, the language of two people who didn't need to speak to be understood. When she whispered my name against my neck, it didn't feel like seduction. It felt like trust, like letting go. Later, wrapped in each other beneath a worn blanket, her head resting gently on my chest, she asked, "Does this feel real to you?" I looked down at her, her eyes wide, unsure, hopeful, and I nodded. "It feels like the only real thing I've had in a long time." Because it did. No pretense, no masks, just us, raw and tender and trying. We didn't say, "I love you," not yet. But it was there, in the way she traced lazy circles on my thigh, in how she held me like she was trying to keep the world out, in the silence between our words, full and safe and sacred. That night, I didn't sleep because I was scared, not of her, but of how much I wanted her to stay. And when the morning came, sunlight spilling through the blinds and her arms still wrapped around me, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of falling anymore. I was already there, and for once, I didn't want to run. The first time I felt safe again, it wasn't the kiss that changed everything. It was the way she looked at me afterward, calm, steady, like she already knew my answer before I said a word. We didn't rush. We didn't label it. We just existed beside each other, brushing shoulders in the kitchen, falling asleep to old movies we never finished, letting the silence between us say what we were too afraid to voice. One night, lying beside her in the dark, I whispered, "What if I'm too broken to do this?" She didn't flinch. She didn't try to fix me. Instead, she reached for my hand, gently laced her fingers with mine, and said, "You don't have to be fixed. You just have to let yourself be held." And I did. That was the first night I didn't dream of running, the first night I didn't brace for loss. Her presence wasn't a distraction from my pain. It was an anchor in the middle of it. She didn't save me. She stayed with me while I saved myself. In a world that had asked me to shrink, she gave me space to breathe. She never said, "I love you," not yet. But every quiet gesture, the way she remembered my favorite tea, the way she left the lamp on when I stayed up late writing, felt like the beginning of something sacred. Not love at first sight, but maybe love at last safety. When she whispered, "You're home." Somewhere between the laughter, the quiet dinners, and the unspoken glances, something changed. We never declared what we were. We didn't need to. Love didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like the way she'd remember my favorite songs, or how she'd hum when she washed dishes, or bring me tea without asking. It was subtle, but it was constant. And one evening, as we curled up on the floor sharing strawberries and old stories, I looked at her and knew this was more than comfort. This was home, not a place, not a label, but a feeling. When she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "You feel like home," I didn't reply. I couldn't. My heart was too full. Instead, I held her closer and let that moment settle in my bones, soft and sure. Because for the first time, love didn't feel like a storm. It felt like shelter. We never planned this, but it became everything. We never sat down to define what we were, no big labels, no pressure, just two people choosing each other, again and again, in small ways. She started leaving things behind, her sketchbook, her favorite hoodie, a toothbrush beside mine. None of it was intentional, but each item felt like a quiet declaration. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We didn't plan for a life together, not exactly. But one lazy morning over tea, she asked, "What kind of dog would we get if we ever moved?" And suddenly, we were painting futures in the air, not promises, but possibilities. Our days weren't dramatic, they were soft. Cooking side by side, sharing playlists, slow dancing in the kitchen when no one was watching. There was a rhythm to us, gentle, familiar, safe. And yet, even in the calm, fear lingered. One night, wrapped in blankets and candlelight, she whispered, "What if I lose you?" I squeezed her hand, kissed her forehead, and said, "Then let's not rush. Let's just be. One breath, one day, one choice at a time." She smiled, and for the first time, I saw it in her eyes. Not just hope, but belief. And in that moment, I realized we hadn't just stumbled into something beautiful, we'd built it, together. "I'm scared of losing you." She whispered. It was late. Rain tapped softly against the window. We were tangled together, limbs and blankets intertwined, the world outside hushed and distant. She shifted, just enough to look me in the eyes, her voice barely audible. "Can I tell you something that scares me?" I nodded, heart already bracing. "I'm scared of losing this, of losing you." Her words weren't dramatic, just honest and raw and real. "I have never felt so sure about someone before," she continued, "and somehow that makes it harder, not easier." I reached for her hand, laced our fingers together slowly, gently, like a vow. "I'm scared too," I said, "but I'd rather be afraid with you than feel safe with someone who doesn't see me." She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding and rested her head on my chest. My arms wrapped around her instinctively, grounding her in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched her, the way her brow furrowed in dreams, how her fingers twitched softly like she was holding onto something even while asleep. And in that moment, I promised myself, no matter how scared I got, no matter how uncertain life became, I wouldn't run this time, because she wasn't just someone I was falling for. She was the first person who made me feel like I didn't have to apologize for being scarred. She didn't try to fix me. She stayed while I learned how to hold my own pieces. We didn't say "I love you" that night, but we didn't need to. It was in the way she gripped my hand like a lifeline, the way her foot searched for mine under the blanket, the way I whispered "I'm here" into the dark, hoping she'd never forget. And in the softness between us, not loud, not perfect, we found something worth fighting for, something we could call ours. We never said "I love you," but it was always there. There were no grand declarations between us, no dramatic moments, just tiny things, the way her fingers always found mine, even in sleep, the quiet hum in her throat when she was relaxed beside me. We never rushed. We just settled into each other. One morning, I woke up before her. Her head was tucked into my shoulder, breath steady and warm. I traced gentle circles on her back, wondering if she knew how safe she made me feel, like I could stop holding my breath. Later, as we made coffee, she looked at me with that familiar softness and asked, "Do you remember our first kiss?" I smiled. "You were soaked from the rain. You hugged me like you were afraid I'd disappear." She chuckled, then whispered, "That was the first time I didn't feel like I had to chase love. It just came to me, like you." My heart clenched, not from fear, but recognition. Love had always terrified me. It came with conditions, expectations, pain. But with her, it was different. It wasn't loud or consuming. It was warm, safe, slow, a choice I made every morning we shared, a rhythm I never wanted to stop dancing to. That night, we lay in bed, the sound of distant thunder curling through the silence. She leaned in close, her forehead resting against mine. "I love you," she whispered. And it didn't feel scary anymore. I whispered it back, not because I had to, but because it had always been true. We were just finally saying it out loud. "You never even liked romantic movies before me." It was one of those lazy Sundays. Emma's head was in my lap, a half-read book resting on her stomach. I was playing with her hair absent-mindedly when she suddenly looked up, eyes wide like she'd just remembered something important. "You never even liked romantic movies before me," she said, smiling. I blinked. That's true. I used to think romance was a lie, just pretty endings written to sell hope. I never believed in the slow dances or the whispered confessions, not until her. With Emma, love wasn't fireworks, it was breakfast in pajamas. It was soft hands tracing the rim of a coffee cup while we talked about everything and nothing. It was the way she remembered I liked too much honey in my tea and that I hated the smell of oranges. I laughed and said, "It's not that I hated romance, I just didn't believe it was possible for me." She leaned in then, her smile turning soft. "And now?" I brushed her hair behind her ear and whispered, "Now I know it's real. Just not always loud or perfect. Sometimes it's quiet, like us." She kissed me, slow, certain, full of something that felt like home. And in that moment, I realized love hadn't changed me. It had returned me to myself. Not the guarded version, not the one who swore never again, but the version who still believed, deep down, that love could be safe if given time, patience, and someone who saw you completely. Emma didn't rewrite my story. She helped me start a new chapter. And in that ordinary Sunday light, I knew this wasn't just romance, it was real life. And somehow, it was even better. When love feels like a quiet home, there were no labels, no promises, just us. We didn't have to say what we were because it was already written in the space we shared, in the way her toothbrush stayed beside mine, the way she'd hum while stirring too much honey into my tea. One evening, while we were curled up under a blanket, Emma looked at me and asked, "Can I tell you something that scares me?" I nodded. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. "I'm scared of losing this, losing you." I didn't speak right away, not because I didn't feel the same. I did, but fear had always been part of love for me. Fear of it ending, fear of it changing me. I took her hand gently and whispered, "Me too, but I'd rather be scared with you than safe with someone who doesn't really see me." She exhaled, relief washing over her face like sunlight after rain. "I don't want to lose us." "Then we won't," I said, and meant it. Love wasn't some perfect picture for us. It was daily choices, soft reassurances, and learning each other's silences. We weren't building something flawless. We were building something honest. There were still moments of doubt, but she always came back to me. And I always stayed. Love didn't rescue me from my past, but with her, it felt less heavy. And slowly, in all the quiet mornings and shared laughter and music playing low in the kitchen, we began to believe in something steady, not the kind of love that burns out fast, the kind that stays, that folds laundry with you, that remembers the way you like your coffee, that doesn't ask you to change, just to stay. And I did, because for the first time, it felt like home. The day we chose us again, the rain had softened to a gentle mist by the time Emma knocked on my door. Her hoodie was damp, her eyes tired, but her smile, small and brave, said everything before a single word left her lips. "I told my mum," she whispered, "about us." My breath caught. We'd lived in this quiet, private world, and I'd almost forgotten there was a world outside it. "How did she take it?" I asked. Emma's shoulders fell slightly. She didn't yell, just said I was ruining my life, that I'd regret it. The words stung, even though they weren't mine, but I could see how heavy they sat on her chest. "You're not ruining anything," I said gently, reaching for her hand. "You're choosing what's real." She didn't answer, just pulled me into the kind of hug that asked to be held for longer than usual. That night, we didn't say much. We sat cross-legged on the floor, eating takeout and letting the silence speak. Later, as we lay in bed, her fingers brushed softly over my shoulder. "They say they love me," she murmured, "but it feels like they're grieving me instead, like the version I used to be was easier to accept." My heart ached for her, for anyone who's ever had to shrink to be loved. I kissed her forehead. Their comfort isn't worth your truth. And she cried, not because she was weak, but because she was finally letting herself be seen. We made love that night with slow hands and tear-stained kisses, not out of passion, but from the deep need to feel whole again. And in the quiet afterwards, wrapped in each other, it became clear. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't confusion. This was a choice. And every day since, we've kept choosing each other. She came back, different, but still hers. When Emma walked through the door that afternoon, it wasn't like the movies. No dramatic music, no sweeping embrace, just her, standing there, tired eyes, trembling breath, arms full of silence, and still mine. She didn't say anything at first, just stepped in and wrapped herself around me like she'd been holding her breath the entire time she was gone. I held her, tight, not to keep her from leaving again, but to remind her she still had a place here. Later, as we sat on the floor eating cold leftovers, she finally spoke. I couldn't stay. It felt like I was suffocating, like I was being asked to become someone I'd already outgrown. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw how much strength it took to say that. You don't owe anyone a version of you that no longer fits, I said. She nodded, a small tear escaping. I just want to feel like myself again. That night, we didn't talk about what happened while she was away. Instead, we let our bodies speak in soft movements and gentle touches, the language we'd learned in quiet moments before the world got loud. She kissed me like she needed to be reminded she was still loved. And I kissed her back like I'd never forgotten. It wasn't about forgetting the pain or pretending it never hurt. It was about coming back to each other, even if we both came back a little changed, because love, real love, holds space for the growing, the grieving, and the returning. And when I looked at her curled up beside me that night, I knew she was still Emma, still mine, and we were still choosing us. When her silence spoke louder than words. Some things don't need to be said out loud to be felt. Lately, Emma had been quieter, not distant exactly, but like she was living in two places at once, here with me and somewhere far away inside her own head. She still smiled, still touched my hand when we passed each other in the kitchen, but the warmth behind those gestures felt faded, like a candle trying to stay lit in a storm. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but I was scared. Scared she'd say she didn't know, scared she'd say it was me. That night, while we lay side by side, my fingers tracing lazy shapes on her back, I finally asked, "Where do you go when you get quiet like this?" Emma took a long breath. "Back to the voices I thought I left behind," she whispered. "The ones that told me I was broken, that this, us, wasn't real, that I'm not allowed to be happy this way." Her words sank deep, slicing through both of us. I turned to face her and took her hand. "They were wrong," I said gently. "You're not broken. You're brave. You're real. And this love, our love, is real too." She blinked back tears. "I want to believe that, but some days it's like their voices scream louder than mine." I pulled her closer. "Then let mine be louder. Let me remind you, every day, every night, that you're allowed to be here, to love, to feel joy." She tucked her face into my neck and held on. And I realized then, love isn't always grand gestures or loud declarations. Sometimes it's just choosing to stay, to reach across the silence, to whisper back against the noise, "You are safe here. You belong." And that night, wrapped in each other, we didn't say much more, but we didn't need to, because healing doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just breathes.